In this lesson, we're going to be going over how to prep the turkey head for painting and the painting process. This is a freeze-dried turkey head. That's what I recommend for all your turkey work. In my opinion, they look more natural than an artificial head, and they've got the bonus of having the hairs on it, which is what a lot of people like. In a good freeze-dried head, you want to look for an elongated area between the beak and the major carnicles. You also want to make sure everything's plumped up nicely. The major carnicles, the rest of the carnicles, the snood. You also want to see a slight curve back here in the head. That's going to help us to tuck our head back into the pan of feathers or the cape of the turkey. There are a number of steps we have to do to prep the head for the paint booth. Step number one is we have to prepare a wire that we're going to use as our fixturing wire for our painting process and also to attach our turkey to the form. This is 9-gauge soft black wire. You'll see on your screen where you can buy this. This is about a 12-inch piece where I have the end sharpened. That's a great start. We might be cutting off a little bit more of that as we move through the process, but we'll start with 12 inches. The first step is we have to cut our foam. There's a couple of cuts we're going to be making for this. The first cut is the cut that's going to be flush against the crop area we carved in our form. If you recall from the form prep lesson, we carved a foam insert, and this is exactly where that's going to be going. But this is too much neck, what comes with this particular freeze-dried head. We don't need all this neck. A full strut bird isn't showing much neck, so you don't want to have all this on here. We're going to make that cut now. I like to run it down at an angle like this. That'll be our first cut. Just take our knife and you want this to be a level cut, so you want to check it from a number of different angles. That's what it should look like. I'm going to make another cut. I call this the hinge cut. This is going to allow us, once our bird is on the form, to hinge the head forward to tuck the skin underneath. Make it a little bit more cut here right on the back to level this out a little bit. Very important that this is level and straight. You want to look at it from a number of different angles. Now, we very well might be cutting this neck down even a little bit more after we have our bird sewed up and we size our head, but I like to start with this. That's the beauty of my mounting system, as throughout the process you can continuously adjust everything to get it just right. If we would mount the turkey right now with the freeze-dried head touching the foam, we have no space for our skin to tuck in. So we need to make some notches or grooves in our foam for that. You want to open it up more than you might think. Turkeys don't have as thick of a neck as many people think, and if you keep it too thick, you're going to have feather distortion. Just going to start making some cuts, and I'm coming up underneath these major carnicles and just breaking the foam out. This is a very important step. Also, when you're doing this, you want to make sure that you're grooving up into it at a nice angle. You don't want an abrupt cut in. It should be angled up in. That's going to give you really good flow when we tuck our feathers in underneath this freeze-dried head. The same on the back side. We want to open it way up. Sometimes people will put pins in here when they're freeze drying these, and you might have to pull those out. You can kind of twist and turn your knife when you're doing this if you need to break that foam out. You can see I'm using a knife where the tip has broke off. You don't have to use a knife like that, but if you're lucky enough to have one where the tip did break off, it makes it a lot easier to do this step because you're not accidentally pushing through the freeze-dried head. Okay, we get up near the notch of the head. Put my knife in and start turning a little bit. This is not an area you're going to be seeing on your finished mount. It's going to be tucked with the pan or saddle of feathers right up to it, but it's still a good idea to make it look nice and neat back here. I look at it head on. Look at it from underneath, make sure I do have it completely cleaned out. Sometimes it can be a little stubborn to get that foam out of there. If you're trying to put a larger freeze-dried head on a turkey that's small, you'll have to cut this foam out even more. Okay, we have all of our foam removed. Now we're going to take our curved scissors and we're going to remove any excess feathers from underneath the major carnicles. These feathers are not necessary in our mounting process and they're just going to get painted, so we need to remove those now. Some freeze-dried heads will have more than others under here. Flip it around to the back. I like to remove all of these feathers on both sides. They're not necessary and they're just going to get full of paint. So we'll just go ahead and pull those out. If a few do get stuck in, it's not a big problem. We can take them out later. But I like to get rid of them now. Okay, we've got those removed. Now we're going to remove some of the hairs from around the beak. If we keep some of these hairs here, they're going to get stuck in our paint and our gloss coats. So I'm going to slightly lift up the snood, and using my curved scissors, I'm just going to cut those out and get rid of them. Same on this side. Side's got quite a few more of them. Now I'm going to take some 320 grit sandpaper. I'm going to sand the beak. The beak has some flaking on it we need to get removed before we paint, or our paint will not adhere correctly. Try to get in here a little bit. If you can't get the entire beak, it's okay, but it's a good idea to try to get some of it. You can just kind of blow it off as you're working on it to get the dust removed. And sometimes as you're doing that, you'll release a few more of these little hairs. We'll just go ahead and cut those out now. You can also see on our beak we do have a little repair right here. We'll need to put a little bit of epoxy in there to fix that. You can also see there's some other shot damage on our head we'll be fixing. The next step is we have to remove the dead skin from the head. This is a layer of skin that's directly on the outer shell of the head. If we keep that on in weather changes, as the head expands and contracts, your paint can peel off and crack. To do that, we're going to be using a wire brush. You don't want too harsh of a wire brush for this. You want one that's fairly soft. You don't want to scratch into the freeze-dried head itself too far. I'm going to start on this major carnacle just to show you what I'm doing. So you can see what that looks like all cleaned off. You can also see the dead skin on my workbench. That's what you want to remove. You want the entire head to look like this. Now we'll continue to do the rest of the head. We have all the dead skin removed from our head. It's important when you do this to have on a dust mask. If you don't have on a dust mask, you can get this in your throat and you can get a pretty bad sore throat from it. So have dust mask on, maybe have a fan blowing behind you to get rid of that dead skin flakes as you're doing it. Now we'll put our 12-inch piece of black soft wire into the head. To do this, I like to start about right here with my attachment point. So I'm in the center, going up into the head. And the wire is going to come to about right here where my finger is. And look at it head on. I want to make sure that I am level. It's going in. If you push it through too much, you're going to come through the head. So the wire is just coming to here. We're not going to try to get the wire all the way up to the skull. It's not going to happen on a full strut. You don't have to worry about that. Look at it from a number of different angles, make sure it's in straight. Again, we probably will be cutting some of this wire down. We may even be moving the position of this wire later. But for now, this is a good start. And for a lot of mounts, this would be the correct position to start it out in. Say I have a wood stand here. We're going to be using this stand throughout the epoxying and the painting process to hold our head up. Now we're going to mix up some epoxy sculpt. This is an AB mix, mixed 50-50. You want to wear gloves when you're mixing this, and we're also going to be needing some hot water for doing our epoxy repair work. Mixing together equal parts of A and B. When you're using epoxy, you want the epoxy to be fairly warm. So if it's really cold, you might want to put it by a heater before you use it. Makes it a lot easier. We're just going to knead it and roll it to mix it up. We have our epoxy mixed up. We also have some hot water just out of the sink in this container. Paper towels, we have a eye clean-off brush, a couple of modeling tools, and a pin. That's what we're going to use to fix the shot holes on the turkey. As you look over the head, you might have to look kind of close to see them all. Some heads are going to be worse than others with shot damage. Trust me, if you don't see it in this step, you're going to see when you start putting paint on it, so you can fix it there. We want to try to get as much of it done as we can right now. There's a big area here that has a hole, and it's missing quite a bit from where the shot hit it. So we're going to start with that. Take a little bit of our epoxy, dip it in the hot water. A lot of people tell you can't use water when you're doing these repairs on a freeze-dried head. I've never had a problem using water, as long as you don't get a lot on there. If you just use a little bit, it's not a problem. Some freeze dryers will fix some of these for you. Most of the time they will not. It'll be your responsibility to fix these when you get them back. Okay, now there's a little hole right here, so we're going to fix that. You also notice I'm wearing gloves when I'm doing this step. If you use enough of this epoxy sculpt over the years, you can develop some pretty bad rashes from it. So it becomes mandatory to wear these gloves. We've got these 3 shot areas fixed. We have to blend those areas into the rest of the head. If we left it like this, it's going to look too shiny here. So I'm going to take a pin, get a little water on it. I'm just going to make some lines and grooves in that. I'm going to take my paper towel and just dab it over that. Helps to blend it in even more. You just don't want it to look too shiny. That's the big thing. We'll also look at the major carnicles. A lot of times they have some areas that need to be fixed. You can see a little area right there. Like I said before, if you're not sure if it needs to be fixed or not, you will know for sure when you get it in the paint booth. You can't hide anything from paint. So you'll know very quickly if we need to do something else. This major carnicle, there's another little spot right here we're going to quickly fix. Again, we're going to take our pin, make a few lines in that, and then just blot it out with our paper towel to give it a rough texture. If you look on the edge of your head, you'll see the pinholes where they pinned it into the foam for the freeze dry process. We're going to fill all those pinholes with epoxy. You don't have to worry about blotting that out or trying to blend that in here, but we're just going to put a little bit of epoxy in each one of those holes. And you want to do that on both sides of the head. You also want to look at the eyes. Sometimes in the front corner of the eye, there can be a little gap here. That is natural, but if it's excessive, I like to fill it in a little bit. And on a lot of freeze-dried heads, it is a little excessive. So I'm just going to put a small amount of epoxy in there. Smooth it out. Take my eye cleanup brush. Just spread that. I would make it look natural again. That's what it should look like. You also see underneath the eye, there's a little area right here that needs to be fixed. I'm going to fix that right now. Take our pin. Two lines, and then we'll just take our paper towel and dab that area out. If you recall, we had talked about a beak repair. This is very common. Beak repairs are very difficult to do. Luckily on this one, it's just a small little shot hole right here. And take a small amount of epoxy and just fill in that grooved in area where the shot hit it. Smooth it out into the rest of the head. Take our modeling tool and just cut the epoxy off so it matches the rest of the beak. You'll see I've got a few more hairs coming down, and we can fix that up right now or right before we paint it. We can just nip those off. So don't worry about them right now. Okay, that's our epoxy repair on the beak. I like to keep that fairly shiny. I'm just going to dab off any water directly around it. I don't want to take too much off there. Now we'll continue around the rest of the head, fixing up all this shot damage the same way we fixed this up. We have all of our epoxy repairs made. We're going to set the head aside, let that epoxy cure out. That normally takes about 3 to 4 hours, and then we can proceed with painting.